So if you've read the title of this video, you're going, oh gosh, you must be really prepared for this one. It's a list. It's 5 films you must see before you make one. And I knew that I'd know which films to say once I actually sat in front of the camera, so I didn't actually write the list. But now I'm going to just, off the top of my head, tell you the 5 films that you should watch before you make one. And it's gonna surprise no one that on this list is The Big Short. Now, the reason I always put The Big Short on lists like this is because it is an incredibly effective fictional film about a very real thing that nobody understood. It took an incredibly dense piece of subject matter, the 2008 financial crisis, that entire systems and economies did not want you to understand. It got the most charismatic actors on planet Earth to act it out. It would take these incredible fourth wall breaking moments and go off on tangents, and it would be funny and devastating, humorous, interesting, intricate. It did not shy away from telling people the details of what happened. But it was accessible. People understood it. It's damn near a blockbuster. Like, very much almost. Directed by Adam McKay, who was a longtime collaborator of Will Ferrell, who is Will Ferrell, it had that aspect of incredible importance, an incredibly important film with a lot of humor that was also incredibly accessible. I have watched tons of films and documentaries about the 2008 financial crisis, none of which have been a better tool for me advocating for economic parity and, you know, the abolishment of the capitalist hellscape that we currently live in than The Big Short, because it doesn't insist upon itself. Yeah, so that's The Big Short. Second film you need to watch. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Now you're going, Umnia, that is a very recent film by Helena Rayan. Yes, it is. It is a very recent film by Helena Rayan, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. She's not Gen Z. I believe she's Gen X. And she may have made the most defining film of our generation. It had an understanding of female friendship dynamics and internal friendship politics far beyond what Helena Rayan should be able to understand about kind of the experience of Gen Z women in that scenario. And it was also really, really well made as like a horror movie. Funny, light, a lot of interesting themes and topics within it. But what I think you have to learn the most from any of Helena Rayan's films, but certainly Bodies, 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 is how quickly and smoothly she moves through scenes. She talks a lot about her process being one of intense pre-production and pre-viz with her DOP, going through and getting all the shots done in advance, prepping and practicing, so that when the actors come in, it's fully solid and it's all in one place, ready to go. And that's a brilliant way of making films. It's also an incredibly intense way of making films, and it is clearly inspired by her time as an actress within the theatre. Her understanding of mise en place and creating a frame that is really considered and choreographed without being contrived or feeling blocky or stunted or manufactured is a skill that very few filmmakers have. And so though I would recommend any of her films, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is perhaps the best example of that in her work. Big Short, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. What's the third one? Oh yeah. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? So Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is a film I've actually written an essay about. And speaking of which, we'll talk about the other film that I wrote about in that essay in a second. But I wrote an essay about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf for Art Film, a collection of film essays about art on film. It's the title is technically Art on Film, but art/film, art film is how I usually refer to it. But I wrote an essay in this book about performance and how the theatre has influenced cinema, because cinema is a product of the theatrical experience. We call the cinema the movie theatre because a lot of theatres were converted into cinemas. A lot of the theatrical language, a lot of how we perceive acting, how we have understood the craft of acting within cinema has all come from theatre. And some of the very, very best of filmmakers were some of the very best theatre makers. And aside from Mike Nichols, Orson Welles, Gene Kelly also came from dance and theatre. So many really brilliant actors of the early ages of cinema were from the theatre and understood that theatre was a primary way of being involved in good art making, and that principles of the theatre could really help people understand and empathize with characters. And so much of that has crossed over. I will not go over that essay here again. If you want to read it, you can purchase a copy of Art Film. I'll put a link in the description. But the reason I mention Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf as being something you have to watch before you make a film is it breaks a lot of the rules that people are used to when they think, especially beginner film school students, think you have to abide by in order to make a good or beautiful film. One of the best things about early golden age films, and especially things like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf which is further later down the line, of course, but what I loved about those films is that they are the antithesis of what your film teacher will tell you makes a good film now. They had long takes, and they were a lot of wide shots. There was a lot of theatrical staging of things, and especially in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, it's like you've brought a camera to an immersive theater experience, as opposed to the camera being the primary witness of a series of events. Instead of being the voyeur, the god in a scene, the camera now becomes just a person in the room watching. I love that type of filmmaking. It is also seen very clearly in Linklater's work, specifically the Before series, which is another series you must watch before you go to film school, and certainly before you make a film, but is not actually in my list. But the Before series is required reading. I would say Before Sunset is my favorite, because it is the least romantic and the most cynical each of those films get, because it's the perfect balance between the cynicism and the romance of either film, either side of it. Before Sunrise is very hyper-romantic, and Before Midnight is very cynical, and right in the middle is Before Sunset, sorry. Right in the middle is Before Sunset, which has all of the cynicism of having grown up, but none of the lack of yearning and need for connection, which I think is the perfect balance of where I am right now in life. So that's the third film, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. The fourth film is the other film that I juxtaposed Virginia Woolf against, which is Mulholland Drive. Now, Mulholland Drive also breaks a lot of the rules that you would think make a good cinematic experience. And I love David Lynch for this specific point. A lot of filmmakers worry about not making sense. A lot of film schools teach you to make sense. And in this industry right now, there is an overabundance of over-explaining. There is a lot of, here's what's happening, here's why it's happening. I blame cinema sins, but we don't have to get into that right now. David Lynch made stories without explanation. People call it like dreamy or fugue state or dream state or dream filmmaking. They kind of relegate it to this, oh, you have to think about things in this dreamlike way. Mulholland Drive is actually quite an obvious film. When you finish the film, you will know what has happened. You will know why it's happening. Most of the events will make sense by the end. If it doesn't, it just means you don't believe women when they tell you what is happening. You can't really empathize with women, because the film, if you can empathize with the women inside, especially the two main characters, is very obvious about what story it is trying to tell you and what warning it is trying to give you. Speaking of warnings, as we did in previous episodes, those warnings are vital warnings. They're vital warnings for anyone, especially a woman trying to break into creative industries. Warnings about age, warnings about sentimentality, warnings about romance, warnings about rose-colored glasses, and also, other than the warnings, a real hope, a real sense of hope and honor to the pursuit of being a creative person in the world. It is hard, it is full of obstacles, it is rife with abuse, but it is a noble pursuit nonetheless. And that's what I took away from the film. And I think anybody that wants to make films needs to watch films that are regarded as being the best films of all time, that break the rules. And before any film school teacher tells you that you need to learn the rules before you can break them, listen, learn the rules, because then you'll know when you are breaking them. But you don't need to know the rules so you can break them. You know how to tell a story. As Dan Harmon very rightly says, everyone in this world learns how to tell a story. How else are you going to tell someone what happened to you last Thursday? How do you tell your friends over coffee what you've been up to? How do you tell someone when someone's been hurt? These are all stories. You know how to tell a story. Now it's just about, these are why I've picked the films that I've picked. It's about finding the way of telling stories that matches the story you want to tell. And these are all different ways, different modes, different mediums, different formats of being able to communicate effectively the story you want to tell. The approach with The Big Short is nowhere near the approach that David Lynch would have taken to that piece of material. If you look at David Lynch's Dune movie versus Denis Villeneuve's Dune movie, it's the same material, it's the same story, completely different approaches on how to communicate that story. And, of course, Mulholland Drive is not an original story. It is something any woman within entertainment has had to go through. But the way it is told does not just tell you more about the story. It does not just deep more the story, the warning that Lynch is trying to convey. It also tells you more about Lynch himself. And I think some of the best art does that, where it is telling you something about the topic. It's telling you something about the topic. It's telling you something about life. And it is telling you something about the person speaking. My final movie that I would like to recommend to you. I am torn between two. They both star Anne Hathaway. I think I'm going to go for the more esoteric one. The one I always recommend that film students watch is Ella Enchanted. Now, so far in my list of films, I've picked a lot of films that are considered somewhat well by critics. You know, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and Mulholland Drive are highly rated by critics. You know, The Big Short was well received. And Bodies, Bodies, Bodies was also quite well received. And these are not films that are considered like happy-go-lucky family films. And these are also not films that are considered mostly safe for children. But Ella Enchanted is both of those things. It's meant to be this happy-go-lucky fairy tale about this girl who, when she was a child, was cursed, that she must do anything anyone tells her to. She will be obedient. And it is a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant film about feminism and conformity and being the odd one out and being, you know, it's kind of Cinderella, but it's also something else, je ne sais quoi. And what I love about the film is it does not shy away from the nastier, genuinely darker aspects of patriarchy, but it did it through a kids' film. It did it with, you know, dance scenes and, you know, Anne Hathaway and Hugh Dancy. And again, it communicated itself effectively. And this is what I wanted to say in terms of this entire list, is you have to watch films before you make one. But the reason you have to watch these 5 before you make one is so that you know how many options you have in how you approach making movies. You can make your incredibly dense takedown of the patriarchy into a fairy tale film. You can make your humorous commentary on Gen Z into a horror movie. You can make your analysis of a financial crisis into a comedy. You know, there are so many options around you. You can turn a play into just a cinematic play. You don't have to do too much. Mike Nichols just took a camera and got, you know, Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton to just run free on screen, fully theatrically, without too much cinematic language involved. Sometimes at film school, or just generally in cinematic and cinephile spaces, we all think we have to do something like everybody else. We all think we have to follow the rules or do something particularly outstanding with the form, break the form, you know, or whatever the case may be. Or really do to the pinnacle of Martin Scorsese or, you know, Coppola. and take the cinematic language and absolutely nail it. And yes, Scorsese and Coppola have absolutely nailed their interactions with the traditional way of making a good movie. Goodfellas is a good movie. But there are other ways to get your point across. And they are no less cinematic. In fact, one might argue, they are part of what makes cinema such a brilliant medium, is there are really no rules, and the fewer rules you know, the less likely you are to stop yourself if you're about to break them. So yeah, those are my 5.